Hello, I'm Susan Woods, a nonprofit consultant of Susan Woods Nonprofit Consulting Services. The title of this class is Establishing the Perfect Nonprofit Board of Directors. A little bit about me before we jump into the class. Again, I'm Susan Woods. I started a nonprofit organization myself in 2003 called Comprehensive Community-Based Solutions Incorporated. I officially incorporated it as a 501c3 in 2006. Underneath that organizational structure, I offered two programs, Panorama Computer Learning Program and the Emerging Leaders Mentorship Program for Black male youth. I offer nonprofit consulting services. Specifically, I complete the 501c3 application packet for private clients from beginning until end. I also facilitate a broad range of classes for nonprofit leaders. I have 3 nonprofit certifications or certificates. I have a nonprofit management certificate from Duke University, Winthrop University, and Wake Forest University. I am also a 3-time graduate of Winthrop University in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I earned a bachelor's degree in business administration, a Master of Arts degree in business education, and a Master of Business Administration degree. Services that I offer are as follows. On the Susan Woods Nonprofit Consulting Services, I offer nonprofit DVD classes like you have that you're using now. I have instructor-led nonprofit classes that I facilitate in person. I have private nonprofit consulting services that I provide. And again, I complete the 501c3 application packet for people who are interested in starting a nonprofit organization, and I complete those packages for people across the United States. I respectfully request that you please read this copyright notice. Thank you. The course topics, we have an overview, responsibilities, board development, quarterly meetings, committees, public image, compensation, and a brief knowledge check at the end. Let's take a look at the nonprofit organizational structure. Now, this is a typical organizational structure for most organizations. However, you would create your organizational structure based on what your organization needs, but this is a typical structure. The title of the nonprofit organization is always up top, and in this case, the example is Community Empowerment Incorporated. Then you have your employer identification number, which is called an EIN, and that's the number that is used to track the progress of your business in terms of financial reporting, revenues, and expenses, and also used to check the status of your organization on the irs.gov website. Then you have the board of directors, which we're going to talk about in more detail in this class. Underneath the board of directors, you have the executive director, then the director, and then your line of managers, programs manager, operations manager, public relations manager, and finance manager. In this case, in this example scenario, we have 2 programs that the Community Empowerment Incorporated organization offers, Fitness and Nutrition Program and a Computer Literacy Program, which is managed by the Programs Manager. Under the Operations Manager, you have the Logistics Team, Facilities Team, Human Resources Team, Legal and Compliance Team. Under Public Relations, you have Traditional Media Team, Social Media Team, Advertising Team, and Cultivation Team. On the Finance Manager, you have the Accounting Team and the Revenue Generation Team. Once again, this is just a typical example of a nonprofit organizational structure. Yours may vary depending upon your needs. Overview. Choosing the right people to serve on your nonprofit board of directors is very, very important because these are the people who are going to govern the way your nonprofit organization functions. What is a nonprofit board of directors? Board members are the fiduciaries who steer the organization towards a sustainable future by adopting sound, ethical, and legal governance, implementing financial management policies, making sure the nonprofit has adequate resources to advance its mission, and serves as the guardians of the public trust. Again, the board of directors are the fiduciaries who steer the organizations toward a sustainable future. Your goal is to sustain the organization, to keep it going, and that's the primary function of a board of directors. Now, they do that, they sustain the organization by adopting sound, ethical, and legal governance. They have to govern the organization. They implement financial management policies so that they can be accountable for the financial resources that the organization acquires. They make sure the nonprofit has adequate resources to advance its mission. So you have to have resources. A lot of times people seem to think that you don't have to have financial resources for an organization, but you do. A nonprofit organization requires financial resources to exist. So the board of directors is in charge of making sure the nonprofit has adequate resources to advance the mission, whatever the mission is. And then finally, serves as the guardians of the public trust. They have to make sure that the organization earns the public trust and maintains it by the way the organization operates. Board responsibilities. The board of directors includes people who perform different responsibilities depending upon your role or the role that you serve on the board of directors. Let's talk about the board responsibilities in more detail. The board of directors governs the operations of a nonprofit organization. We just talked about that. They make sure that the operations that you use to promote your mission or to strive to achieve the vision are in compliance with IRS regulations. Has a public service duty to the entire community. The community in which you operate your nonprofit needs to feel comfortable and confident that your organization is adhering to the guidelines and the bylaws that you have stipulated. And I just said that, ensures adherence to the bylaws and the articles. Now the bylaws list the operational procedures that you're going to use to govern your nonprofit organization. The articles of incorporation basically do the same thing. However, they are submitted to the Secretary of State's office in the state in which you operate and are approved on the state level. And then that certificate of approval, is sent with your application packet to the IRS to earn 501c3 status. So your articles of incorporation must be approved by the Secretary of State's office before you are even awarded the 501c3 designation. The board of directors manages the legal and fiduciary affairs. All of the legal and fiduciary affairs that the organization has are managed by the board of directors. The board of directors demonstrates accountability for integrity. You cannot operate a nonprofit organization over a long period of time if you do not demonstrate transparency and a high level of integrity. You have to be accountable to the actions that you take to provide the services. Promotes transparency and ethics. That's another task for the board of directors. You have to be willing to show people who are interested, for example, in seeing your financial records. You have to be willing to show that transparency and a high level of ethics. The board of directors secures financial resources consistently. Sometimes board members are under the misconception that they are not responsible for securing financial resources. And when in fact they are responsible, that's a major part of their job to make sure that the organization has the financial resources that it needs to operate consistently. So those are the responsibilities of the board of directors. So now let's go on now to talk about the board structure. At the very top, you have the board of directors, and then you have the president, the vice president, the treasurer, secretary, and an at-large member. These are the typical roles that most board of directors have. It's not written in stone that you have to use these same titles. You may have different titles that you want to use, but again, these are the most commonly used titles that people use to describe the roles that are a part of the board of directors. You always want to have an odd number of board members so that if there is something on the table in which you need to vote on, you want to be able to break the tie if needed. The board of directors includes an odd number of members to prevent ties when voting on different topics, as I just said. 5 board members is sufficient for most nonprofit organizations. Now, there are some states that have a requirement for a certain number of people to serve on a board, and there are some states that do not. You will have to determine how many board members you're required to have, if there is a requirement at all, based on the state in which you plan to operate your nonprofit organization. Let's talk about the different roles. The first role that we'll talk about is the president of the board, or the board president. The president completes the following tasks: preside at all quarterly board meetings. So we're talking about meeting on a quarterly basis, and that's a very common meeting time that people use for board meetings because it's just 4 times a year, every 3 months. And most people can attend meetings if it's on a quarterly basis. Now, monthly meetings can be a little taxing for people, especially if they have full-time employment already. So the president presides at all quarterly board meetings, serves as the chairperson of the board of directors, reviews the annual report submitted by the executive director, vote on issues that require votes for implementation, approve all committees, temporary or permanent, confirm all reports are properly stored per IRS guideline, sign the monthly bank statements, which will be 3 at each board meeting, because you're meeting on a quarterly basis, so that means you're going to have bank statements for each of the 3 months in the quarter, submits financial personal contributions at each board meeting. And some people say, wait a minute now, I'm supposed to give personal contributions out of my own finances at each board meeting? And the answer is yes. The board of directors need to decide upon how much is expected of each board member to contribute at each meeting, but there is an expectation that board members should make personal financial investments in an organization in which they sit on the board. That makes sense because when you are talking with investors, especially foundation investors or people who are going to give significant amounts of money, they may ask, do the board members contribute personally to the organization? And if you answer no, they're going to wonder, well, why should I? If the people who are closest to the operations of your board of directors do not feel as if you or feel as if they should contribute financially, then why should anybody else feel that way? So you want to make sure that everyone has an understanding of that. Now you may have to decide upon the amount, maybe $100 a month, or I'm sorry, $100 a quarter, or $300 a quarter. That represents $100 a month. Whatever it may be, you may want to decide upon that, but board members need to make a personal contribution to the organization in which they serve. Next, submit contributions from the public at each board meeting. Board members are also expected to encourage people in the community to contribute to the organization, and they need to bring those contributions to the quarterly meetings as well. Attend networking meetings to promote the organization in the communities. When you are working in the communities, or if you're networking in the community, you want to make sure you promote organizations at every opportunity. And finally, board presidents should schedule 3 meetings per quarter with potential investors. That could be 1 meeting per month with people who may want to invest in an organization. The president of the board of directors should be willing to do that. Let's talk about the vice president. I don't need to read each one of these for the vice president because it's exactly the same as the president. They perform these duties in the absence of the president. So everything I just said about the president, the vice president performs those duties in the absence of the president. And if the president is available, then they still attend the meetings, but they still have to adhere to these tasks too that are listed. The treasurer shall complete the following tasks. Monitors the accountability of all monies belonging to the organization in partnership with the executive director. So the treasurer works with the executive director to make sure that all money is accounted for in the organization. The treasurer responds to financial inquiries from the IRS when applicable. They vote on issues that require votes for implementation. They monitor the submissions of Form 990 information reports, and this is crucial because the Form 990 information reports are due by the 5th month and 15th day after the fiscal year ends. So if the organization's fiscal year ends on December 31st, then the Form 990 information report is due May 15th. The job of the treasurer is to make sure that those Form 990 information reports are submitted on time, because if the organization does not submit the Form 990 information reports for 3 consecutive years, then the IRS status, 501c3 status, is automatically revoked. The treasurer signs checks for the organization that exceed $1,000. They provide a written account of the finances of the organization. They submit personal contributions as well as contributions from the public, and they also attend networking meetings to promote the organization. The secretary completes the following tasks. Keep the minutes and records in approved storage locations. Now, during the meetings, the secretaries may, nowadays, with so much technology available, they may go ahead and just, while in the meeting, just key the minutes in their notepad or on their laptop computer and then upload to the cloud. You know, once upon a time, you would take notes and then you would type them later and then you would store them in a file cabinet, or you would store them on a hard drive of a computer. It depends on what you have established as a record keeping method, but the point is the minutes and the records must be approved or stored in approved storage locations. They must make meeting minutes accessible for public inspection, and the easiest way to do that is just to upload the meeting minutes onto the website. They give and serve all notices to members of the organization, so they make sure that our board members know when the board meetings are going to be held, time, and location. They vote on issues that require votes. They share communication addressed to the board of directors. For example, if letters come into the organization, the secretary has presented that information at the board meetings. They respond to all correspondence sent to the organization. And again, nowadays with digital technology, the correspondence may come in the form of email. They may not always come in the form of hard copy mail through the actual United States Postal Service. They submit personal contributions at each meeting. They submit contributions from the public at each meeting, and they attend networking meetings to promote the organization, just like all the other roles. And finally, you have the at-large member, and this person serves on the board as an at-large member. They are a voting member. They vote on issues that require votes. They submit personal contributions. They submit contributions from the public, and they attend networking meetings to promote the organization. As you can see, they don't have a formal function like the president, vice president, treasurer, and the secretary, but they do have voting privileges. So this role could be filled by someone that you want to serve on the board, but they just don't have the time available to have specific tasks to complete as a member of the board. So those are the roles for the board of directors and the responsibilities of each role. When you are thinking about bringing people on to the board of directors, please make sure that the role in which they feel fits their personality and fits their availability to serve. Let's talk about board development. Board development includes 7 steps. Board development, and here are the 7 steps: recruitment, interviews, selection, orientation, training, evaluation, and retention. Those are the 7 steps to board development: recruitment, interviews, selection, orientation, training, evaluation, and retention. The first step in establishing a board of directors is recruitment. You want to announce the board vacancy or vacancies. You want to describe the vacancy. Do you have a vacancy for a president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, or at-large member? Use social media to get the word out. Use traditional media to get the word out. Respond to your inquiries when people inquire about the different positions that are available. Consider volunteers to serve on your board. If they're already volunteering with your organization, they will make excellent board members. Or you can ask for recommendations. Interviews. The second step in creating a nice board of directors will be an interview process. Invite the candidates in to interview. Allow a team interview setting. Have other people who are already serving on your board participate in the interview session. Ask the right questions. Make sure you have the questions already written before the interview. Describe the expectations, and this is very important. Depending upon the role or the vacancy that you're planning to fill, make sure that the candidate understands the expectations of that role. Watch their body language. If it looks like they are not comfortable with the explanation of the roles, then maybe probe a little bit to make sure that they are comfortable with the role and the expectations. Answer their questions. They should have questions that they want to ask about the different opportunities and the different roles that are available. Make sure you answer their questions. Explain your selection criteria. What criteria are you using to select people to serve on your board? And then be sure to share the next steps in the process, in the selection process, so they will know what to expect after the interview. Here are some examples of interview questions that you can use, and this comes from joangary.com. She is an expert in the nonprofit sector. Question number 1, what do you know about our organization? Potential candidates to serve on the board of directors should know about your organization, especially if you have a website that provides information. 2, what are the characteristics of a great board member? And have them describe the characteristics they feel are important for people to have as board members. Number 3, what is your fundraising experience? You want people on your board who have experience with the fundraising, because In order to sustain a nonprofit organization, you have to have fundraising activities. 4, would you attend lunch meetings with the executive director and potential investors? This is important because you want your board members to be engaged in the cultivation process. Cultivation meaning the development process that you use to enhance relationships with potential investors. You want them to be a part of that. Next, how would you describe your strategic thinking abilities? We need strategic thinkers on the board of directors, people who can think about what if situations, people who can think about long-term planning, people who can think about opportunities to sustain the organization for the long term. And then finally, how much autonomy do you have in your schedule? Do they have time available in their schedule to serve on the board of directors? Because it's more than just serving or just coming to the quarterly meetings 4 times a year. They have to be able to attend meetings with potential investors, attend networking events where they can promote the organization, be able to communicate with potential investors to secure contributions to bring to the meetings. So it's more to this opportunity than just meeting 4 times a year. So you want to make sure that they have the availability in their schedule to serve on the board of directors and to be effective. Now it's time to talk about selection. The selection process. Meet with board members to discuss the candidates' qualifications. Now remember, you just interviewed the candidates to serve on your board of directors. Now it's time to come back as a group to meet with the current board members to discuss the candidates' qualifications. Select the candidate with the best interview scores. During the interview process, you probably use a scoring system to rate the candidates based on their interview skills. So you want to select the candidate that have earned the best interview scores. Determine if the candidate will honor their promise to the community, even if that means saying no to you. During the interview process, you should have had a question that asked the candidate, how would they respond if you, being the executive director or the founder of the organization, if you had made a decision and they felt the decision wasn't in the best interest of the community in which they promised to serve, how would they react? Would they have the courage to say no to you? You want someone who is not going to be a yes person. You want a person to serve in your board of directors who will always keep in mind the best interest of the community. And even if the founder is proposing something that is not in the best interest of the community, that person, that board member needs to feel comfortable enough to say no, even to the founder, even to the executive director, to whomever it is. Invite selected candidates to join the board of directors. So if you select a candidate to join your board of directors, you want to invite them to let them know that they have been selected. Confirm their acceptance. Make sure that they have accepted their position, because it may be a period of time between the interview and the selection process, and during that time period, they may have moved on to something else or may have lost interest. So you want to make sure that you confirm that they do accept the assignment on the board. And then if they accept the assignment, then you want to send an orientation invitation. You want to send an invitation to them to attend an orientation session to learn more about their responsibilities as well as the expectations of the board of directors. So you have the orientation session. During the orientation session, you want to welcome board members and you want to complete the following steps to make them feel comfortable being new members of the board of directors. Reserve a facility to host the orientation session. That's important because you have to have a place to facilitate the orientation session. Provide great food because you want people to feel welcome, and food is always a source of doing that. Create an agenda. You must have an agenda to use as a guide to facilitating the orientation session. Create a presentation, create a fun presentation to share with new members of the board of directors. Provide team building activities with members who are already serving on the board. And this will give the new members an opportunity to participate in a fun team building activities with current members so that they can feel comfortable and get to know them in a laid back environment. And prepare an orientation information packet. Be sure you provide them with an information packet so that they can see your professionalism, your ability to prepare for the meeting, and to provide information that they can take away from the meeting and read later, and also to have as a part of their records. So let's talk about what the orientation information packet should have in it. Like I just said, the orientation information packet should be something that's put together. They can read it at the meeting, but they can also use it as a takeaway from the meeting to read at a later time. So an orientation information packet should contain the following. The nonprofit history. Every board member should understand the history of the nonprofit organization in which they plan to serve. Nonprofit vision and mission statement. What's the long-term vision? What's the short-term mission? That needs to be clearly stated in the orientation packet. Include biographies of the current board members, and that way they can have an understanding of who are the current board members. What are their backgrounds? What are their educational experiences, work experiences, professional experiences? Board member job descriptions. What are their job descriptions? Not, the current board members, what do they do on the board? Provide a description of that. Board member agreement. Make sure there's an agreement within the board orientation packet so that they can look at what they are agreeing to do as members of the board. Conflict of interest policy. Make sure that you include in the orientation packet a conflict of interest policy so that they can understand the importance of always keeping in mind that they are serving to benefit the community. They are serving to benefit the clients. This is not a self-serving opportunity. Let them see recent financial reports because board members need to feel that you are trusting them to see the financial reports. That's something that they need to see in order to measure your ability to sustain the organization over a long period of time, or it could show an opportunity for them to see how they can play a role in enhancing the ability for the nonprofit to raise money more effectively. Make sure they have a copy of the bylaws as well as the state certificate of incorporation. That should be included in the in the orientation information packet as well. The bylaws are what board of directors use to govern the management of the organization, and the certificate of incorporation shows that the organization filed the articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State's office, and those articles have been approved. And in your orientation information packet, you see a copy of that certificate showing that they have been approved. You want to include a copy of the IRS determination letter. The IRS determination letter is a letter you receive from the IRS that shows that your 501c3 application was approved, and this letter proves that it was approved. Now, the IRS application or the 501c3 application is officially called the Form 1023 Application for Recognition of Exemption. You want to have in there a copy of the insurance liability policy. Board members should be covered by an insurance policy to prevent them from being held liable for things that may come up during the operation of the nonprofit organization. So they want to make sure that they are covered and not held liable for things that may happen. For example, accidents that may happen that involve your clients. You don't want your board members to be in a position where they can be personally sued by anyone for any reason. So you want to make sure that policy is in the information packet so that they can read it themselves. The travel policy, you want to have a policy in place that explains the travel. What type of travel do you allow for board members to use as a representative of the organization? Provide a list of investors, people who have invested financially in the organization. This is a list that's crucial for board members to have because they need to be able to reach out to people who have invested in the organization to introduce themselves as a new member of the board and to explain the responsibilities that they have accepted. Let them know that there is a whistleblower policy in the information packet as well to explain how the whistleblower policy works, because you want people who serve on your board of directors to feel comfortable bringing issues up that may have a detrimental impact on the organization. So they need to understand that your organization does provide a whistleblower policy to protect them if they want to share information anonymously. Talk about the rotation policy. How often are board members rotated off of the board, and what process do you use to do the rotation? Do you have board members who serve on an annual basis, a 2-year basis, 3-year, 5-year? Explain the rotational policy in writing and include that in the orientation information packet. Provide them with an annual meeting calendar. We've already said that most boards meet on a quarterly basis, which is 4 times a year, because there are 3 months in a quarter. So they meet 4 times a year. So you want to provide them with a calendar for the entire year to show them when they're going to meet, the time and the location. Show them or include in the orientation packet an evaluation checklist. This evaluation checklist explains how they're going to be evaluated based on their job performance serving on the board. We need to set the expectation that you will be evaluated. You will be evaluated based on certain criteria that will be outlined in the evaluation checklist. Talk about the compensation details. As we know, board members are not paid a salary. They're not paid a salary. So talk about how board members are going to be compensated to serve on the board of directors. Are you going to pay them stipends to attend the meetings? Are you going to reimburse them for travel expenses to the meetings? What type of compensation details should you share or must you share with your board of directors, and include that in writing as a document in the information packet? The contractual agreement. We want to make sure that all board members understand their responsibilities in the roles that they serve. And it's helpful to have some type of agreement. If you don't want to call it a contractual agreement, have some type of memorandum of understanding that they need to sign to say that I have read the responsibilities of my position on the board and I understand those responsibilities. That's important to have those things in writing. These are the components of the orientation information packet that every new board member should have. And I would venture to say it wouldn't hurt to have this information made available at each meeting as well. Even if you don't review it, you can make sure people have a copy of it. The source of this information that I shared is from the councilofnonprofits.org. It's an excellent website that you can use to gather information about how to operate your nonprofit organization successfully. Now let's talk about training. Once they have gone through the orientation session, it's time now to provide training for your board members. So how do you train new board members? Training board members is crucial to success. You want to make sure that they understand IRS guidelines. So it wouldn't hurt for you to go to the irs.gov website and review policies and procedures that pertain directly to board management. Review the expectations of the board of directors with your board members. Again, create team spirit. Let them know that they are a part of a team that has been assembled to provide a service to help people in the community reach their full potential. Share the presentation or share a presentation, a training presentation with the board of directors. And in the presentation, you want to share information that's going to help them be successful in their roles. Sometimes board members hire outside facilitators to come in to facilitate this training session because, well, it's just a change. You may have people who are subject matter experts in board development. It would certainly benefit the entire board of directors to have an outside facilitator come in to bring a fresh perspective to the organization, and then also give the regular facilitators who normally facilitate classes on the board an opportunity to sit down as a student and learn, and that's always important. You want to have the board manual of operations or policies and procedures that you want to discuss during your training sessions. Discuss how boards are formed. Discuss the board formation, the process that goes into creating an effective board of directors. And then we go back to the evaluation form, which is the last bullet item on this list. Make sure they understand the evaluation form that's going to be used to determine how well they are performing as a member of the board of directors. So this is the training process that you should use to train new board members for success. Let's talk a little bit more about how boards are formed, the stages that are used to develop a board of directors. These stages can be used to develop any type of team, but since we're talking about the board of directors, we'll just relate these stages to the board of directors development. The first stage is forming. It's called forming stage. That's stage number 1. Under the forming stage, most team members are positive and polite. Some are anxious as they haven't fully understood what work the team will do, but in this forming stage, this is when you bring all board members together in one room during orientation or during training or whatever, but you bring them together for the first time in one room for them to meet. And like this stage states, they're normally positive and polite. Some are a little nervous. The next stage is called storming. This is the storming stage. People have met, they've come together, and now it's time for them to go to the next stage of development, which is storming, unfortunately. Storming often starts where there is conflict between team members' natural working styles. This is a stage where teams fail. If they're going to fail, they're going to fail here. And this is an unavoidable step because you are putting together a group of people with different personalities, different backgrounds, different goals. You're putting them together to work together toward a common cause. However, people have different personalities, different work styles, different ideas, And in the storming stage is when these differences will come to light, and sometimes they will come to light in a negative way. So then you have the next phase called norming stage. After the forming stage, you have the norming stage. This is when people start to resolve their differences. They start to appreciate their colleagues' strengths and respect your authority, your being the executive director, your being the founder, your authority as a leader. So this is when, we've calmed down, we have collected ourselves, and now we start to talk and communicate and resolve the differences that have come about during the storming stage. And the final stage is performing. This is the stage in which, okay, you've gone through the norming stage, you've worked out your differences, perhaps some people may have left the team, but now it's time to perform. It's time to get the job done. And this is when the team works together to achieve the goals without friction, and the manager can delegate and trust the employees. So this is where the board members come together and say, okay, we're going to work together. We're going to perform our duties as outlined, as we have signed our memorandum of understanding or our contractual agreement, and we're going to work together. We're going to perform. We're going to work together. And the president can feel comfortable delegating and trusting other board members to perform their duties the way that they're outlined. Now let's talk about how do you evaluate board members, because it's important to set the expectation for board members to understand that they will be evaluated. So you have an evaluation checklist that was included in the orientation session, that was included in the training session. So no one can say, I didn't know how I was going to be evaluated, or I didn't know I was supposed to do A, B, C, and D. Yes, you did. You had the evaluation checklist presented to you twice, during the orientation session and also during the training session. Secondly, the board members' performance must be evaluated annually. You want to use an annual evaluation process to measure how well or how effectively they served during the year. You want to provide constructive feedback, and this feedback can come from the other members of the board of directors. For example, if you are the vice president of the board, then the constructive feedback could come from the president, treasurer, secretary, and at-large member. If your performance just does not meet expectations at all, then you can be voted off of the board. Or if you feel like this position is more than you had anticipated, you can leave, you can resign your position on the board. You also want to provide positive feedback for each other. If you see that the treasurer is doing a fantastic job managing the financial resources of the board, promoting transparency and accountability, and acting in the highest level, using the highest level of integrity and ethics, you want to provide positive feedback to the treasurer to let them know that their work, their efforts have been recognized and are appreciated. And finally, since you don't provide compensation for the board members, you want to offer appreciation gifts. Something just to show them. If you have a certificate of appreciation, if you have maybe $10 gift cards to their favorite restaurant, you want to make sure that you do show appreciation for people who are taking the time out of their busy schedules to be a part of your organization and to serve on your board of directors. That's important. How do you retain board members? The retention process. How do you keep people coming back to serve on your board? Well, you want to show gratitude. Just like I just mentioned, you want to provide some type of appreciation gift to let them know that you do appreciate, that you do know how to express gratitude for what they are doing for you. Allow suggestions. Don't have people, don't be a dictator just to dictate to board members what should be done. Have them or give them the ability to make suggestions. And then when they do, listen actively. And what I mean by actively, we live in a world where people have their phones in their hands almost 24/7. Some people can say they're listening to you and have their phone in their hands and they're just scrolling and texting or reading or whatever. That's not active listening. That's not active listening at all. You want to be able to put the phone down, sit down with your board members, look them in the eyes, and talk with them and listen to them without interruption. That's active listening. Provide ongoing training. You want to make sure that your board members are up to date on the current activities of board members, or they understand how nonprofit board members or board of directors function. So allow them to go to ongoing training at your expense. And then, if feasible, host fun retreats with the members, with the directors. Take them away someplace to have them enjoy themselves, and that would also promote team building as well. So those are just some of the ways that you can retain good board members. So let's talk about those quarterly meetings that I mentioned. Board meetings should be held on a quarterly basis. Again, some people do monthly, some people do twice a year, some people even do once a year. But the lawyer that I retained for my nonprofit organization emphasizes the importance of meeting on a quarterly basis. That's a good balance because you're not asking too much of your board members to come together once every 3 months. So let's talk about the board meetings in more detail. Tips for successful board meetings. Number 1, prepare for the board meeting. What's the location? Make sure you have materials and make sure you have food. The location should be conducive to what the board meetings will entail. You want a location, for example, that's a quiet location, a location that has a good room temperature and space available for all of the members and a table available for people to sit around and talk. Number 2, meet quarterly. Meet in March, June, September, and December. That's just a suggestion. You can start, like for example, the first quarter will be January, February, March. So you have that March meeting that covers January, February, and March. And then you have April, May, and June. And then you have July, August, and September. And then in October, November, December, you talk about those 3 months. Now, some people say, well, you know what? I would rather start my quarterly meetings in January. So you have your meeting in January. So that would cover, the January, February, March, and then you have your first meeting in April, and so on and so forth. That's up to you. Whatever works best for you and your organization. But you just want to make sure you have your meetings on a quarterly basis. Host 90-minute board meetings during the week after work. If possible, don't intrude upon board members on their weekends. That's family time. You want to resist the urge to schedule board meetings during the weekend. If possible, host a 90-minute board meeting immediately after work during the week. And that way, your board members are already out, they're already at work. Have them leave work, maybe start the meeting at 5:30 p.m. and have it end at 7. And that's just 90 minutes. And make sure that you have an agenda that covers everything that you can cover in a 90-minute time frame. Use productive agendas. That's number 4 here. Standard topics and a focus area. What are the standard topics? Of course, call the meeting to order, review the meetings from the last meeting, those types of things. And then you want to have a focus area. Are we talking about fundraising? Are we talking about program services? Always have a focus area to discuss during the meetings as well. Number 5, encourage participation. You have 2 types of people in the room. You have introverts and extroverts. And if you're not careful, your extroverts will dominate the meeting. So you have to be, whoever the facilitator is for the meeting has to be aware that you have to create an environment or create a meeting that is conducive to introverts as well, that would make them feel comfortable raising their hands and letting their voices be heard. Use appropriate voting protocol, motions, a quorum, and so forth. What type of voting protocols do you use in your organization? Now, the source of this information is from boardeffect.com, and that's an excellent resource for you to use to learn everything you need to know about board development and how to use a board of directors. You can find it at boardeffect.com. It's an excellent resource that focuses on nonprofit board of directors. So these are just some tips for successful board meetings. The last tip is record accurate and detailed meeting notes. Now, again, this is a job responsibility for the secretary of the board. So these are the things that she or he should have in their notes. The time the meeting was called to order, names of meeting participants and people who were absent, corrections and amendments to previous meeting notes, additions to the current agenda, whether or not a quorum is present. A quorum means you have enough people present to vote. So in your bylaws, you stipulated the definition of a quorum. Most people say a quorum is 50% of the total number of board members in attendance. What are the voting results? If there was a vote held, what are the results? They need to put that in the notes. What new business did we discuss? What open discussion or public participation did we have? When is the next meeting date and time? And what time did we adjourn this meeting? All of those things need to be included in the meeting notes that the secretary would compile. And this information, again, is from boardeffect.com. Let's talk about board retreats. I already mentioned board retreats before, but let's talk about board retreats just a little bit more. When you consider board retreats, you're thinking about taking your board members away to another location. Normally, people maybe go to a beach or to a spa, or they go out of town and they think it's worth incurring the cost of the retreat. So when you think about a retreat, you have some logistical planning that needs to be completed. For example, the location, the catering, the transportation there, whether or not you're going to hire a facilitator, a professional facilitator to come in and facilitate the board retreat, which most people do, and all of the materials and supplies that you need to have a good retreat. So where are you going to go, the location, what type of catering are you going to use, how many days are you going to be there, the transportation that's required, are you going to go on a minivan, are you going to depending on where you're going, are you going to fly? All of those things need to be taken into consideration. Again, the facilitator you're going to hire, and what materials and supplies will you need for the meeting? All of those things have a cost. So when you think about board retreats, you want to think about, okay, we're going to incur significant costs or expenses to host an off-site retreat. A location is the hotel expenses, catering expenses, transportation expenses, facilitator expenses, material and supplies. All of those are expenses that you're going to incur just to provide a way for your board members to get together in an environment outside of what they're accustomed to. You have to think about the cost versus the benefit. by performing or by completing a cost-benefit analysis. A cost-benefit analysis is you will calculate all of the total cost that's required for this retreat, right? So let's say that to take 5 people, 5 board members on a trip to a retreat, let's say it cost you $5,000 altogether. When you look at the cost compared to the benefit is something that may not be tangible. It may be intangible, meaning the benefit may be improved communications among board members. The benefit could be developing a stronger bond among board members. The benefit could be learning from a professional facilitator, things that you may not have already known. So when you compare the $5,000 to the benefits that people derive from attending the board retreat, maybe the cost is okay. Maybe the benefit or benefits outweigh the cost or the expenses. That's what a cost-benefit analysis will help you determine. So be sure to do that before you incur the expenses of a board retreat. Make sure also that the people who are serving on your board deserve a board retreat. For example, if you have people serving on your board who barely participate in board meetings, who barely attend board meetings, then why would you incur the expenses required to have them even go on a retreat? That makes no sense. So that's something to think about. When you do go on a board retreat, if you decide, okay, the cost benefit analysis tells me that the benefits outweigh the cost, so we're going to go ahead and go on the retreat, this is what you should do to be effective. Have a daily agenda for the retreat. If you're going to be on a retreat, maybe 2 days, make sure you have an agenda for both days. Make sure you have business meetings during the retreat, meaning you have something specific that you need to accomplish on the retreat. You want to use that time to talk about the successes that your clients are enjoying by being involved in your nonprofit organization and by using the services that you provide. You want to talk about success. You want to include some fun team building activities for the people on your board of directors to serve, to enjoy rather. You want to have time for people to free their minds, and that means being able to just say exactly what they want to say. Now, probably not like this lady in the picture here, because it seems like she's been holding things on the inside for a long time, and now she's at the stage of exploding. But you do want to allow people to get things off their chest, to make sure that they are in an environment where they can feel comfortable sharing their true feelings. And then you want to incorporate some alone time, because you don't want people to feel like every day, all day of the retreat, I'm going to have to be around other people, especially introverts. Introverts just don't want to feel like they have to be around people all of the time. They need their quality, quiet time. So make sure you do include some free alone time in the schedule of the retreats. And finally, make sure you provide follow-up, that's the FU, follow-up tasks, so that they can have takeaways. When they go home, they can have takeaways to complete after the board retreat is over. So those are just some ideas, some suggestions to use or to follow for the board retreats. Let's talk about committees. The committees provide support for the board of directors. That's the job of a committee, to provide support for the board of directors. You have the executive committee. And there are different types of committees with different names, but the executive committee includes selected board members who collaborate with the executive director to resolve issues that may arise between board meetings. Remember, we're only meeting 4 times a year, every 3 months. But during those 3-month time period, you may have some issues that will arise that need to be resolved before the next meeting. So the executive committee can be responsible for resolving issues during that in-between time. An executive committee is a forum to share ideas, concerns, suggestions that do not need to be expressed during regular board meetings. You don't want to have board meetings where everything is on the table to discuss. You want to have the executive committee to kind of serve as a buffer to talk about things that are not appropriate to talk about during the regular quarterly board meetings. The executive committee is also a place to test strategic plans. I have a problem with my STR words. A place to test strategic plans prior to presenting to the board. So this is a place to kind of say, let's talk about these things. Let's talk about some plans that we think we should implement and get consensus on those plans during the executive committee meeting before you present them to the board. Or if you present to the board, and maybe you decide after you talk about them that maybe we shouldn't talk about this during our regular board meetings. You want to review the bylaws to determine if amendments are needed during the executive committee meetings, because as your organization gets older, grows and gets older, then the bylaws may need to be amended depending upon whatever changes may occur during the life of your organization. Resolve conflicts among board members through mediation. If possible, if there's a conflict among your board members or conflicts among your board members, use the executive committee as a forum to resolve those conflicts using some type of mediation techniques, because you don't want to have people attending board meetings who are involved in conflicts that have not been resolved, because that negativity is going to carry over to the board meetings, and that's never good. Your executive committee is used to move ideas forward between board meetings. Maybe there were some ideas that were shared during board meetings, and your committee is now responsible for moving those ideas forward and having those ideas implemented between the board meetings. Executive committees are normally used by larger nonprofit organizations, because if you have a small nonprofit organization, you may not have enough board members to extract members out to serve on an executive committee. So, it may be larger organizations or larger board members that use executive committees, but you could be a smaller organization that you may extract maybe 3 people to serve on the committee. But if not, then if you don't have an executive committee, then just think about the consequences of not having one to complete the task that we've already discussed on this page so far. An executive committee also reports actions taken between board meetings. So when you go back to the board meeting, the executive committee will report the actions that were taken during the executive committee meetings. You want to share that during the regular board meetings. Now, and also remember this, the executive committee does not replace the board of directors. That's not the intent. The executive committee is created to supplement the board of directors by completing all of the tasks that have been listed here. So that's the executive committee. Let's talk about the finance committee. Now, this is another committee that supplements the board of directors. The finance committee, this group of people is in charge of making sure that your nonprofit organization has the financial resources required to offer services and to sustain the organization over a long period of time. So the finance committee is in charge of governing or monitoring the revenue generation team manager. Now, the revenue generation team manager is the person who is given the annual budget for the nonprofit organization, the annual budget that has been approved by the board of directors. The revenue generation team manager is given that annual budget by the executive director. So let me walk back and explain this process. The members of the organization, managers, director, executive director, they get together and they determine how much each of their segments of the organization needs to operate for the next year. For example, the program manager may say, well, I need a total of $100,000 to offer the programs to the community that we have promised. And then the operations manager will give their budget. Then the public relations manager will give their budget, and so on and so forth. The budget will include, for each segment, will include personnel, program services, and operational expenses. So let's say that all of the budgets equal $500,000, right? That's the total annual budget that's required. The executive director would then go back to the board of directors to give them the organizational budget projections for the upcoming year. The board of directors would vote and say, okay, $500,000 is fine. We can start raising the money. The executive director then would take that approved budget, give it to the revenue generation team manager, and say to that person, we need your team to raise $500,000 to be able to offer our services next year. Now, the revenue generation team manager would then divide up the $500,000 among the three managers listed here. You have the grant writing team manager, the fundraising team manager, and the ambassadors team manager. So the revenue team manager may come to the grant writing team manager and say, okay, I need the grant writing team manager to raise $300,000 of the $500,000 we need. Then they would give the fundraising team manager a $100,000 goal and the ambassadors team manager a $100,000 goal to raise. And that's a total of $500,000. And then the grant writing team manager would then go to their team members, which includes the RFP researchers, which is request for proposal researchers, the grant writers and the proofreaders, and say, we have been given a task of raising $300,000 or writing grants to earn $300,000 for the organization. The fundraising team manager will go to their team members, the traditional fundraisers and the social media fundraisers, and say, hey, we have been given the responsibility of raising $100,000 for the organization. And then the ambassadors team manager will go to their team and say, telemarketers and network professionals, and say, we've been given a task of raising $100,000 for the organization. That's how that works. And then they would implement their strategies to raising the money to meet their assigned goals, financial goals. Now, the finance committee, in between the board meetings and between the quarterly board meetings, the finance committee will make sure that they communicate with the revenue generation team manager to ensure that they are progressing toward meeting the goals effectively. So in between, during the 3-month period between the meetings, the finance committee will be communicating with the revenue generation team manager to make sure that the fundraising and the revenue generation is happening the way that it should. So that's what that's all about. The finance committee will also adhere to the IRS 990 information report guidelines, or they will make sure that the finance manager adheres to these guidelines, and they will remind them of the guidelines and the reporting requirements of the guidelines. For example, if the gross receipts are $50,000 or less and they don't have any assets, then they will let them know they can file the 990N, or which is also called an e-postcard, and you can file that online at irs.gov like in like 15 minutes. If the revenues or gross receipts are $50,000 to $200,000, $50,000 to $200,000, and they have assets of less than $500,000, then they can file the 990EZ. If the gross receipts or gross revenues are $200,000 and $1 or more, and the assets of $500,000 and $1 or more, then they would have to file the 990. So if we've already said that the fundraising goal is $500,000, so we already know that the organization will be required to file the 990 information report. Let's talk about the Public Image Committee. This is a committee that some people don't use, but they should use. And this committee makes sure that the public image stays positive for the nonprofit organization. So they manage the way employees that work for the nonprofit organization, they manage the way they present themselves to the public. They even manage volunteers. They let volunteers know that there's an expectation of how they should conduct themselves in the public, even when they're not acting in a capacity of representing the organization. Written materials. How do your written materials reflect the professionalism of your nonprofit organization? How about your website? How does it look? Does it reflect the image that you need it to reflect to gain respect from the community? Your social media sites, they need to reflect a positive public image. Program accountability, we've already talked about that. Are you doing what you said you're going to do for the community? You said you were going to have after-school programs for youth that help them become productive citizens. Are you doing that? Financial stewardship. Are you spending the money the way that the money was stipulated in the guidelines to be used? If so, can you prove it through financial transparency? All of these things are a part of the public image, and all of these things are what the Public Image Committee will be monitoring to make sure that the organization stays on the right path to success and reflects the right image in the community. I'm going to pull up a few images here on this page, and as you look at each image, think about what that image means to you. Is it positive or is it negative? as the images come up. I'm not going to share any type of feedback about the images, but just looking at the images, what comes to mind? When you look at each one of these images or logos for different nonprofit organizations, what do you think about them? Are they doing good work? Do they have a good reputation? Would you contribute to them financially? If your logo were to be placed on this page, what would people think about your public image? Would they say that your organization is doing great work or not? Public image can destroy an organization if it's negative. We have to be so careful about how your organization is presented to the public because we know that bad news spreads much faster than good news. So we have to keep a positive public image. And that's what the Public Image Committee is responsible for doing. Let's talk about board compensation now. How are board members compensated for the services that they provide by serving on the board of directors? Board members do not receive formal compensation. They don't receive a salary normally. Now, there are some exceptions, but the normal rule of thumb is board members don't receive a standard salary. They serve on the board of directors voluntarily. They normally serve as volunteers on the board of directors. They receive stipends to reimburse them for some expenses. For example, if you have a board member who has to travel to attend your board meetings and they incur expenses to do that, then you can certainly provide a stipend to reimburse them if that type of expense was included in the bylaws that had been approved by the IRS. You can recognize board members for their services with small gifts, like I mentioned before, a certificate of appreciation, or maybe a gift card to their favorite restaurant. They can use their service as a promotional tool. A lot of people who serve on board of directors or serve as a member of a board of directors, they use it as a promotional tool for themselves. They may put it on their resume, they may put it on their business card. They use it sometimes to promote themselves. They are covered by liability insurance, so they should be, so they are not held responsible for any type of lawsuits that may be presented against the nonprofit organization. They are protected by the indemnification clause in the bylaws. That means they can't be held, again, almost like the liability insurance, but they can't be held responsible for things that may happen during the course of operation of services provided by the organization. Not necessarily in terms of being sued, but they just can't be held responsible for things that may occur that are unexpected as a part of the operations of the board of directors. I mean, of the organization, excuse me. They get the good feeling of knowing that they are contributing to implementing community-based programs that are going to help their clients be more productive or reach goals that they may not have been in a position to meet without having been involved with this organization. And they feel good about sharing their time and their knowledge. They are in a position to share their time and the knowledge that they've acquired to make the organization better. For example, if you have an accountant serving as your treasurer, they are certainly in a position to share the knowledge that they've acquired through their profession to make your organization better. Thank you so much for taking the time to complete this class. I hope the information that I shared about board development exceeded your expectations. If you have any questions or concerns about the information that I have shared in this class, please feel free to call me directly at 704-968-2769, or you can visit my website at www.hiresusanwoods.com. Thank you.